Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Bruhnke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. This is one of a series of conversations that we have regularly. I think this one is about every 2 months that we do this, where we talk about logistics. There have been times over the last several years, beginning with COVID, where things on the logistics side have gone crazy. And cost wise and just generally the logistics of logistics have changed from time to time. And now one of obviously the key issues is tariffs and resourcing and all the factors related to what's going on in geopolitics is spilling over into trade, largely on the logistics side. And so we think it's still important to have this conversation on a regular basis for our members so that they can tap in for information today and also identify resources for them to be more successful. So we're going to do a roundtable, and we're going to kick off with Nunzio de Filippis from CargoTrans, based in New York, in the New York area. His office and their offices are in Manhattan. Very familiar with the tri-state area, but also the world. Recently, Nunzio visited Vietnam in early June or late June. And he's also just tapped in globally. Their clients are all over the world. And so he and the team at CargoTrans are tapped in globally as well. And so we thought it'd be a great idea for him to kick things off today and just share what he's seeing. What Nunzio, can be a crazy world out there. Before the recording, you mentioned like there's nothing that happened over the weekend necessarily that's been huge like it sometimes has been over the last couple months. That's probably going to allow us to take a little bit of a breather, and probably a much needed breather. In your case, you have to put up with this every day and figure out what to do shipment by shipment and client by client. How are you faring? Or have you lost any hair, or have you gone gray a little bit?
Oh yeah, I've definitely gone grayer, and thank you, Doug, for putting this together, and to the chamber for doing this every few months. So I like to say that one of my favorite quotes is, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf." Right, and that's by John Kabat-Zinn. And if you think about it, right, from if you want to go way back from the pandemic, as you were mentioning before, but even fast forward into what's happening these past 2 months, it's just been wave after wave after wave. Tariffs on, tariffs off. We have tons of geopolitical issues, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, and all this obviously affects many businesses. All of our customers are in it, and so when I think about these things, they're not going to stop, right? The tariffs aren't going away. Geopolitical issues are not going to, stop it. They're always there. And so I like to take the perspective of, are you going to learn how to surf, or are you just going to let the waves continue to smack you down, right? And so a lot of what we do at CargoTrans is, and really what I'm passionate about, is supporting small, medium-sized businesses, anywhere revenues between 5 million and 200 million, to deal with all this, right? With everything that's going on, with the constant change, to try to make sense of it. And so, yeah, I mean, if you think about like geopolitics in general, tariffs aren't just a percentage, right? It's not just a number. And maybe at one point that's what it felt like. It's like, oh, if someone's taxing us at 20, then we tax them back at 20. But we've quickly learned, and really just a few weeks ago, that there's so much more intertwined. And just look at the example of India, right? Because of their purchases of Russian oil, they just got slapped with 50%, reciprocal tariff, which is which is huge. And that's kind of one where I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. So it's really not only keeping up with the headlines, but then understanding, okay, so now what, right? And then there's a ton more when you think about the geopolitics of it. And so that's obviously one to watch, right? Who has the ties with Russia? And are there other, layers to this that we're not paying attention to where tariffs can come into play? And then you just think about China is the obvious one, right? We're clearly in this, trade war head to head with China. And so the logical thing is, okay, try to move out of China, try to find other suppliers, but we all know that's pretty challenging. Some have succeeded, Vietnam being one of the big winners. But now it's going even a step further, where it's not just you have to remove, where you're manufacturing, but they're even looking at, well, where's the raw materials coming from? And when I say they, I mean customs. And where are the components coming from? And now there's another layer of this 40% transshipment tariff. So it's really all about kind of like understanding the tariff, but also like how do you prepare yourself for what's coming, and then just think about even like the Red Sea, going back to logistics. The Houthis are still attacking vessels. This is 600 plus days where carriers are going along the Cape of Good Hope and avoiding the Suez Canal. So all this are the waves, right? And so what we're trying to do is just support and kind of how do we not only educate ourselves about them, but is there ways to mitigate? Is there ways to ride the wave and not let it smash you?
What are some of the things that you're doing right now to avoid the smashing? You've got to think a little bit ahead. You've got to predict what's going to happen, but you also just kind of have to face the reality. How are you managing through that right now?
So, I mean, our role in this is doing things like this, is kind of going out to the trade, going out to the community, and educating them in terms of not only what's happening, but there are tools. So I'd say the biggest lever that we're helping to educate and pull is all around kind of tariff mitigation. And there's a lot of different layers of tariff mitigation and how that works. But if you just start to peel it back, right, one thing I would say is that it's very clear that tariffs equal revenue, right? That the U.S. administration has basically said this is a revenue generator, and we want every penny of this, right? And so a lot of what customs is doing in the shift, right, pre-Liberation Day, the main role for customs was collections, collecting the duties, that revenue when it comes when shipments get cleared through the ports. Now the shift is collections plus enforcement, and that's really what we're starting to see is as these new regulations, new tariffs, the executive orders, as they start to settle, now we're starting to look at customs saying, well, there's a lot of people doing things the wrong way, and we're going to come after that, and we want to collect all of these dollars. So there's a lot around compliance, right? And how do you prepare yourself, right? So going back to the example of the rules of origin, okay? Many people who are sourcing overseas have an understanding of when a tariff shifts, right? If you've done enough, if you added enough value to a component or to a raw material to now change the country of origin. But that's being challenged. And what we're noticing is if you don't have like a clear documented process of where your materials are coming from and what's being done in the manufacturing process and what countries are doing what and how all that works, if you're not ready to defend your country of origin, you're leaving yourself exposed. So that's like one area. Then just going back to the basics of classifying products and classifications, right? That's being attacked by customs, where they're questioning, well, how did you get this tariff number, right? And how did you decide to use this for whatever product you're bringing in? And what we're often seeing is the wrong answer. A lot of importers are giving is, well, it's my shipper gave it to me, right? Or my shipper who ships this product and produces it all over the world. This is the digits that they use, and customs quickly attacks that to say, well, as an importer of record, you need to do your due diligence that you've acted under reasonable care in ensuring that that classification is correct. And it's not enough to say the supplier gave it to me. You need to partner with a compliance professional to help you and document how you went through the process of deciding, right? And did you look at customs rulings? Did you look at cases of similar products, et cetera, et cetera? And it has to be, you have to be ready to defend it. And in some cases, there's an error, right, that's made, or there's a gray area, right, where it could be one number, it could be another number. And if you don't have this documented, how you've gotten there, and customs determines that you're wrong, then they can go after you for negligence. And that means they could open up 5 years of going after for, let's say there was a rate increase of back duties due. So we're seeing a lot of this kind of aggressive approach. And so it is really important to be ready. And that's kind of what I like to say is let importers play too much defense, right? They wait until customs knocks on their door and says, oh, we are requesting some information. We need to know more about X. How did you get to this classification? And everything that we're doing is trying to shift that mindset to say, let's play offense. Let's be proactive. Be ready. Have your processes documented. So a lot is around that, and just kind of being, prepared for what we're seeing, that uptick in audits. And it's not waiting for something to come across a customs inspector's desk as it did in the past. Everyone on this Zoom call, I'm sure, has AI somewhere built into their processes somewhere, right? Customs is the same, right? They're using AI. They can pick up very quickly shifts in behavior, and they're very quickly going after the bad players, or where they're just carelessness, right? And so a lot of what we're doing is just focusing on this new kind of aggressive outlook that customs is having, and the approach they're taking, and how to protect our customers, and so that they're ready for it. And then there's some real, hard mitigation, kind of like, okay. And I guess the way I also like to always compare this is to a good accountant, right? A good accountant, a good CPA, they are making sure that your tax exposure is minimized, right? They're finding the deductions. A good licensed customs broker is no longer just about being the transactional, can I clear customs on time? It's they need to add value, and a good licensed customs broker will find you the deductions because they exist. It's just that in the past, it never really mattered, right? Because many commodities were coming in with very low tariffs or duty free, and so they didn't need mitigation. We come from a history of assisting many apparel and textile importers, and apparel and textiles have always had elevated rates of duties at around 20%. So a lot of the tools that we're executing aren't old tools, aren't anything new, like that we've just created. They are tools that we've been using for decades, but now we're just using it for really any commodity. So if you're not executing that, you're leaving money on the table. And there's a lot of re-education now in terms of understanding what's a dutiable charge and what's non-dutiable, right? Because even the few $100s of deductions, at a 55% rate from China is significant, right? And you multiply that by any sort of volume, there's definitely mitigation efforts and out there that you can pretty quickly get into 6-figure per year of savings.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take a pause and say you've reached a conversation, a Globinar Global Chamber that is covering what's going on in the world of logistics right now worldwide. And so we have Nunzio de Filippis of CargoTrans based in New York, talking a little bit about what's going on, what they're seeing, and what some of the strategies could be going forward. I suggest all of you, if you've got just a first name or an incomplete description of who you are, please feel free to put your full name and your company name as a participant here in this room, and also share your information in the chat area so that you're all connected. Most of you are members of Global Chamber, and so folks that you should know and be connected with for sure. I'd like to also offer the members to participate. Raise your hand or unmute yourself and feel free to say a few words. I know there are some experts here in the room with some perspectives. I see, for instance, Ildiko Mokran, who's got a perspective as a customs broker on the Europe side, and welcome any thoughts that you might have. Or Jorge Canedo, who is on our advisory board for both Phoenix and Los Angeles, with lots of connectivity around the world, particularly Southwest US and Mexico and globally. Love to hear from both of you, or Mohammed Omar from Turkey, but covering Iraq for us, and has a unique perspective on what's going on in his part of the world. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of the opportunity to be with experts, share your expertise, and we'd love to learn more as well. I see well, some fun folks in the room, so feel free to, like I said, raise your hand or unmute yourself. Nunzio, then in terms of for exporters and importers right now, what is it sounds like part of your strategy is to certainly stay aware, be aware, understand the full life cycle of whatever product you're bringing in, make sure that you've got the compliance side well understood. You mentioned you just got back from Vietnam, and Vietnam has been used by China to have products come into the US to avoid scrutiny, and that's not working as well as it used to be in terms of a strategy. And companies that are just kind of assuming that everything is okay by purchasing Vietnam, I think what you're saying is just assuming and not doing your due diligence really carefully is not a good strategy.
No, not at all. And that's a very hot topic that this current administration is attacking. And it's not only Vietnam, it's really Southeast Asia, right? And so and it's, I think, kind of that next level where we all know direct, partnerships with China have been put on notice, right? And so and you could argue from Trump's first term when he had the Section 301 tariffs that many U.S. importers were starting to diversify and branch out. And the big winners at that time were Vietnam, India, Mexico. But now we're seeing this second uptick of, exactly what is being done in Southeast Asia? Where are your components coming from? Give me details about the process, because we've seen it from our own customers where there's this really overreaching, kind of investigations happening. And I saw that someone put in the chat, has there been like a budget increase from, customs and kind of coming after some of these revenues? I don't know that anything has officially been announced, but what I can tell you is I've never seen this level of aggression. And I'll just give you a quick example. So, we have anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties, and that is really a different task force that goes after this within customs. And we have seen cases from some of our customers where they have gone after them and said, well, the essential character of what you're producing is coming from this material that you're sourcing from China, and that factory is actually under a 180% anti-dumping duty. And since we don't think there was enough done, and there is a related party, right, which is very often the Chinese factories are the ones that own many of the Southeast Asian factories, and even there was just not a great job of really showing that they are separate entities. So we're seeing that they kind of pulled that relationship in and said, you're now subject to this 180% until you can prove otherwise. And this is just the environment that we're in. So we expect a lot more of this, because the executive order that was released earlier this month has a specific section under Annex 2 specifically talking about a 40% tariff in addition to all the other tariffs, for transshipment. So yes, cannot stress enough. And it's not enough to just say I visited the factory and I saw the stuff being, what was done there. It needs to be documented.
One question, and then I'll open it up for other folks to input, and that relates to semiconductor conversation that I think is a little bit more relatively new in the last week that was brought up. Do you work in that space? And, considering how interdependent that industry is, it may have, at least when I heard it, it sounded confusing to me, and maybe it's more clear than it really will be in the future, but it's such an interdependent industry. It's just hard to imagine how you can selectively pick off the kinds of activity that is trying to be stopped. Do you have a sense of what the reality might be going forward there?
So that's an interesting one, and that's where I think there'll be, maybe, I don't want to say pullback, but so kind of like further analysis of like what exactly has been declared under the executive orders, and then, what is feasible, right? And unfortunately, a lot of what we've been seeing is there are some industries like the semiconductors that might be a little bit more protected and get carve outs. And then you have like something like the iPhone, right, from India, which is, that's where a lot of the production was moved from the original. And so now they have an exception. So something that we're noticing is that you're getting these carve outs, you're getting these exceptions, but the small, medium-sized businesses that are majority of our customers, they're not, they're the ones kind of paying the full tariff, right? They're not able to carve out the exception, and those are that's the kind of community that we're really trying to educate and support. But yeah, we don't have the semiconductor customers, but it is kind of tied under there, where they are looking for or they are getting like special carve outs to make sure that it works, because there are many items that you just can't decouple from China, and that's been the complaint for many, right? It's like, hey, this is the only place where they make X material. Like I have no choice. Why am I getting penalized for this?
Ildiko, I thank you for joining today and your perspective from a European side of things. You're working globally. Is there anything that you either would like to ask about or add to the conversation from your perspective?
Actually, I just can agree with Nunzio about the importance of the origin, the goods origin is this is the most important things, like the UK and the EU got the different tariff from the US. So even you are a UK company, you need to make sure you have the correct origin on the paperwork, because the tariffs could be different by 5% for higher 5% for the EU. So it's really important. And lately I just read a lot of articles about the US CPB regarding the tariff classifications. So yeah, these two things what really need to be educated for the companies.
So it's requiring a lot more scrutiny, it sounds like, on your part.
Yeah.
Got it. Sounds.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. One of the things that we're talking about coming up is Mexico. And Eduardo Gonzalez, the conversation that we're having prior to the Semicon West is intended to spotlight Mexico as a destination, and how Mexico feeds into all of this is really important. I don't know whether you have an opportunity to jump in. I saw Jorge Canedo earlier, but he had to jump out. Is there anything on the Mexico side of things that you would like to share, or anybody else? And I might come back to Nunzio on that. Eduardo, are you there?
Yeah, I'm outside, out and about. But yes, so thank you, Doug. Eduardo Gonzalez from 258 Consulting. We help companies locate contract manufacturing in Mexico. And we do see a lot of people trying to use Mexico as a third country. And authorities have been very keen in doing very thorough inspections because of what Nunzio was mentioning about the origin of the not only the product, but also the material. And yeah, anti-dumping plays a big part because Mexico, although is very competitive, labor cost, geographic location, and the free trade agreement, but many of the raw materials still come from Asia. So it's a big issue. And now not only you have tariffs, but also you have geopolitical risks because we saw how Apple got restricted on their supply chain of China, of their critical minerals, and couldn't manufacture in India because China put restrictions on certain products coming out of China. You need permits. So that creates also an additional layer of risks. But yeah, I agree with your presenters. There's a lot of going on in Asia, a lot of people trying to work around. And the best advice is to have a professional helping you make those decisions. And yeah, taking the opportunity, if I can help any of your clients diversify their supply chains using Mexico, happy to talk. Thank you, Doug.
And I'll jump in a little bit because I see Adrian had a kind of a question about because it also touches Mexico as well, the U.S.-China tariff situation with the de minimis going away, right? So, which is not only for China now, even like European goods that they no longer can enter, right, duty free if it's under $800. And this has been something that many businesses, e-commerce businesses, international e-commerce businesses have been relying on. And so when this rule was in effect, there was actually quite a lot of growth in Mexico and Canada around the borders of the U.S. with building like 3PL distribution centers and logistics centers, mainly for e-commerce. And what the strategy was you'd import in bulk into these distribution centers in Mexico or Canada. And then from there, as the orders would come in from US buyers under $800, they do fulfillment from there, right? So they would basically use a courier like a FedEx or UPS. They do all the pick pack and then kind of slap on the labeling, shipping from the warehouses into the US and all coming in duty free. Now that this is gone, that whole industry is really at risk, right? Because it no longer makes as much sense, or it's no longer economical for these importers to be bringing into bulk and then kind of having this added logistics cost to do distribution from Mexico and Canada. So now we're starting to see where U.S. warehouses are looked at again if these businesses continue. Some of them will just go away because it really doesn't make sense, with the new tariff coming in, meaning with no more de minimis rule some of them will just struggle to compete, with full tariffs coming in. Other effects, obviously, on the airline, industry, talking about logistics, is, because of this going away, they were fulfilling a lot of these. There were plenty of airlines and freighters and charters being booked really just for these e-commerce orders coming in duty free. So that just, like that is going to go away. So it's going to be interesting to see how that now affects supply and demand of air freight prices. Yeah, these are something that we're definitely looking at. And in general, I'll say warehouses in the US are quite full for two reasons. One reason is for some that already started to get ahead of this de minimis. So they started, again, bringing back, investing in DCs in the US. And the other is because of all the pull ahead with the tariffs, right? When the tariffs are lower, everyone's rushing to ship everything in, and you have a lot of buildup of inventory, and it's just sitting in a lot of these warehouses. So there is a lot of full 3PLs, and unfortunately, that there's not a lot of turns because they're just kind of waiting for holiday season and things like that to kick in. But these are just some other things that we're noticing.
The Port of LA was the busiest ever in July, historically the busiest month ever. And so that, I think, goes along with what you're saying. Vanita Ross, you have exporter training coming up, and I know you've got a variety of experts that you tap into on the logistics side. What are some of the things that you're seeing in Utah, and are you already connected to folks who are helping the exporters on their logistics side? Are you hearing anything in the Intermountain area that's any different from what you've heard here today?
No, nothing much. It's about the same. Yeah, we have one of our instructors who teaches the class. She worked with an exporting company, so she usually come in and give them all the details on that, how to navigate that process. But it's basically the same. Nothing new, just a lot on tariffs going on. There's some weekly meetings that are happening with World Trade Center Utah on the tariffs, and that's about what we're looking at right now.
When is the export training? Is that in September? It begins?
It starts September 17th, yes. And it's online, so anybody can take it from anywhere. So it's a hybrid class.
Very good. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. Daniel Grad, you're coming to the U.S., aren't you? Have you successfully imported yet yourself, or what's the situation with you?
Yes, correct. So as you've already mentioned, that I'll be visiting states soon. That's going to be between 14th of September and 24th of October. So if anybody would like to connect in person, I'll happily do that. The coffee is on me. When it comes to how we could help, well, we've been recently working with certain solutions that could help your companies in these rough times. So, for example, one of the tools we've recently been working with is something we call a scheduler, a smart scheduler, which reduces the time which is spent by the dispatchers on matching the loads with the drivers. So this is something that's I've noticed is becoming. I've noticed that there is need for such solution in Europe, which is I'm wondering whether it's going to there's going to be a similar need for such a thing in states. So that's what I've been thinking of importing. And when we're talking per se about the import to states. So I'll also gladly learn your opinions about such solution. And yeah, I can definitely drop some ideas which are common at the European market, and maybe some of those are going to be incorporated in the US market as well.
You guys put together software solutions that include in the logistics space. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Got it. Where are you based?
I'm currently in Lodz in central Poland.
Sounds good. And you're visiting the States for about a month in mid-September through mid-October.
Yes, correct. It's going to be mostly Nevada and California.
Okay. Well, welcome. Looking forward to it. Does anybody else have any comments or questions, thoughts that they'd like to share? Otherwise, we'll close the room and we'll have Nunzio make some final comments. Does anybody else have any questions? Adrian, I think, is that Adrian? That's that doesn't look like Adrian, or that looks like someone that I know. Or did you change your name? And I don't hear any additional comments. And so, Nunzio, let's get back to you and maybe make some final comments about really what I take away from this conversation is that compliance and the origin of materials all the way back are critically important for importers and exporters as they're exporting products with different origins to be aware of, and that it sounds like the U.S. government in particular is really cracking down. I don't know how other governments are handling things right now, but probably nowhere near what's going on by the U.S. government. I did one other quick question before you make your final comments. I'd heard that what is the name of that group? That in terms of other government changes, maybe this is the better way to ask the question. In terms of the government agencies that are looking at this, have there been some recent changes in terms of that one organization I heard was either being disbanded or the Bureau of something. I'm blanking. What other changes are we seeing with the U.S. government in terms of how these things are being enforced?
Well, I mean, I don't know about any that are being disbanded. I mean, not to be repetitive, but there's definitely an increase of just the compliance, the audits, the request for information, and also the effort to be able to mitigate that is a lot more challenging, right? In the past, if there was a penalty that you received from customs and it was the first time you had the penalty, you kind of got away with, hey, I have this great track record. This is our first time, you know, my bad. Can we, settle this on some sort of, 50% or whatever it may be. And now they're just kind of like, the directive is not, unless customs did something wrong, like, no. And it's a hard no. And so, some of what we're trying to get our customers to do is embrace some of the partnership programs that exist and have existed with customs. So there's CTPAT, that's Customs and Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. There's like a BKIP, which is a broker known importer program. And so we're just kind of saying, if customs is extending the olive branch, like, you need to really take a look at that and invest in these programs, invest in partnerships with them so that, you can start building up what you're doing in terms of, how you are doing your due diligence, how you are acting under reasonable care. This is really what is being highlighted. And then kind of the other, going to kind of closing comments, is that, there are mitigation opportunities out there. And this for our industry, we've had two very pivotal moments. One, as you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, obviously COVID, right? Through logistics everywhere, up in the air, everyone couldn't get containers out. And so anything that was missing from a shelf, the headline was supply chains right? So you'd walk into your local retailer and something was missing, and the one at the register, the guy at the register would say it's a supply chain issue. You never even heard of supply chain before. So obviously that was an opportunity for us to spotlight and solve some really challenging problems. And now it's existing again with tariffs, right? And everyone, doesn't matter whether you're directly or indirectly affected, is seeing what's going on in the headlines, and tariffs are front and center. And so it's a real opportunity for customs brokers and supply chain professionals to kind of help to shine, right, and to show the trade how we can step in and help them. And so we're in a special place, I believe, and I believe there's a shift going on where it's not about can I process an entry correctly with the correct tariff number and on time and be responsive. Like those three were kind of tickers were kind of the classic measuring tools of how to identify a good customs broker versus an average customs broker. Now you need to do those things, and you need to bring strategy and trade advisory, and that's something I'm passionate about and I believe in, is being able to partner with customers to help them with mitigation efforts, to teach them how to surf, right? If I go back to the wave analogy, like the waves aren't stopping, the tariffs are here, there's going to be more off and on switches that are happening, I'm sure. And so our job, anyone that's really a supply chain professional, is to help teach the trade how to surf and navigate these rough waters, because there is an ability, there are options out there, and yeah, it's just about partnering with someone that can really help them to execute. And there's we can go pretty deep with the options that are there, but within a 30-minute conversation, we can assess pretty quickly where the opportunities are.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for wrapping up. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection, I think that group was what I was thinking of, and why I was thinking of that, honestly, was we had scheduled them to be a speaker at our Chicago chapter, and they delayed it for a number of months this year because of just kind of getting their feet on the ground. And then right after that, in the April-May timeframe, there was some news item that came out regarding that. And I think I got the wrong perception that some change ended up being just simply a change rather than something more wholesale. So you're not aware, I don't think, it sounds like, of any significant changes in what they're doing other than increasing enforcement.
Right, mainly increasing enforcement, and they're out there. Basically, they're enforcing, or the narrative has been this shift from what was considered free trade, was kind of like the policy for many, decades up to Liberation Day, and now kind of the new is fair trade. So they're, that's why all the reciprocal tariffs under EPA have come into effect, because we're enforcing this kind of fair trade agenda, and they are. I'm not surprised that they have canceled to come on, because they're overwhelmed, right? When these changes are being made so fast with these executive orders, sometimes overnight, customs is the one that needs to enforce it, and we are, as licensed customs brokers, reaching out to customs for guidance, and they're sometimes waking up in the morning saying, like, I don't know. Right? Like, I don't know when the system is going to be updated. I don't know when you can, upgrade your IT to link out. Like, we're figuring it out. But meanwhile, the effective date was, let's say, today, and they don't even have the new tariffs in place. So it's been a challenging time for them too, because they're running 100 miles an hour trying to keep up. And there's been some messiness along the way because they're moving so fast. So I'm not surprised they haven't had the opportunity to come and do a talk.
Yeah, we gave up on them and give them some space for sure. Mohammed Omar has his hand up, and Mohammed, thank you. Based in Turkey, and also working in Iraq. I guess it's a lot calmer over there. What are you observing, and what would you like to comment on? Thanks for your work with Global Chamber.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, again for a great meeting. Yes, it's much calmer here, but I think this is the quietness before the storm. As I mentioned before, the Iraqi development road that are building starts from the Grand Fao port in Basra and continues through Turkey to Europe. What my question is, as my logistic is not very long, Turkey, Iraq is neighboring countries, but for the last decade or so, I heard a lot of Chinese ports has been built around the world in Africa and Middle East. And as a logistic expert, do you think that this will be, how you say, the bypassing solutions for the global trade to use those ports to, and also free zones, your thoughts about that, to navigate the supply chain or something like that? This is what comes in my mind when I had the listening to this meeting. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So it's a good question. It's another area where the administration has their eyes on, right? They have seen the investment and influence of China in ports, right? And that's why you saw what happened with the U.S. getting involved with the Panama Canal, right? And kind of pushing Chinese investors out. That's why you've seen the administration saying we're gonna have an extra tariff for Chinese-made vessels, which is the majority of the vessels, or Chinese-owned ship lines, I should say. So they are seeing this as a vulnerability, and they're tucking it in under a security concern. And I think we will continue to see kind of an aggressive approach to how do we deter this from continuing to happen. And in terms of China using those, I mean, it is influence, right, for sure, and there is a lot of leverage that a country can have if they are controlling the ships and the ports that are really moving the world, right? They can easily influence what gets moved in and out. So it's part of the war. It's part of the trade war that's going on, and so yeah, that's something that is being weaponized, and we continue to see it, coming up in different ways where we're trying to. It's this kind of game. Who is going to gain the influence, moving forward?
Great comments. Just looking at some of the chat, Adrian, thank you for clarifying that you're now going by your middle name. That's good. So now that explains things. And Rifat, thank you for sharing. You have a question. That looks like it's more geared toward oil. And while we're digesting that question, Johannes, thank you for zooming in and being a member in Los Angeles. And I want to, if ideally you're available September 3rd, the next in-person event in Los Angeles is going to be in Torrance, and it'll be on near the port on India, but generally overall trade. Nunzio, do you see the question there from Rifat?
So specific issues in terms of oil imports from USA to Asia regions. I don't have a ton of background with oil. In general, I mean, the only thing that we've really been seeing is kind of, this push against anyone that's purchasing Russian oil. And as I said initially, I think that's why we saw India was really penalized heavily for this, because they originally had a 25% tariff coming into effect on August 7th, and now that was doubled to 50%, mainly due to their purchase of Russian oil. But as far as U.S. oil exports, I don't have a ton of background on that. I could say for exports in general, because I think that came up a little bit earlier. Something that we're starting to see is just there is kind of almost an embargo, or kind of against some U.S. exports as a kind of reactionary, right? Because we're in this trade war, and so, like, for example, Canada has really stopped a lot of their imports of Californian wines and Kentucky bourbon. So there are these kind of like micro pushbacks that are happening, because of what's going on day to day. And so unfortunately, different industries that didn't expect to get whiplashed into this are getting pulled in. So that's something to kind of just keep an eye on, is, something that was supposed to help promote our exports in some areas is actually creating some challenges.
Sure. In the last couple of minutes, could you tell us a little bit about CargoTrans?
Sure. So I am the co-CEO of CargoTrans. My father started it in 1989, and he was a licensed customs broker. And we have 3 divisions. We have our international freight forwarding division, and so we're managing all modes of transport, import, export, air, ocean, also domestic trucking within the U.S. and North America. Then we have our 3PL division. So that's we have warehousing, pick, pack. Think of like an Amazon logistics center. So we can do direct to consumer, or we can do fulfillment into major retailers through our 3PL warehouses. And then our last division is our customs brokerage division. I'm a licensed customs broker, and that's where we're doing the transactional clearance, but really these days a lot of the strategy around tariff mitigation. So I've been doing this for over 2 decades now, and as we say, it's in logistics. For anyone that's in logistics, there's never a dull moment. But I think that's what kind of drew me right to this industry, is that it's never the same day twice, and really just passionate about helping our customers. Some of the customers that we serve are producers of apparel, consumer goods. So anything you'd find in a Target or a Walmart in the U.S. Also chemicals. We do furniture, fixtures, machinery. So we have a pretty wide array of the customers that we support. Being in the U.S., it's mostly import bound, but we also have customers that we're supporting with exports as well. So I really appreciate being able to share a little bit with you all today. And thank you, Doug, for moderating and keeping the conversation going and getting everyone involved. Appreciate it. This was my first opportunity to have some dialogue with everyone here at the Chamber. And I know my brother is an active member. He's my partner here in New York. So we're always happy to help to participate with the community. So thank you.
From their base in New York City in Manhattan, the Global Chamber New York City chapter, thank you, Nunzio, for joining today and sharing your expertise. We learned a lot. Thank you all for being part of this conversation as well. Watch for, this is, I think, our only event today, but we've got a full slate of, I think, about 10 different events coming up this week, and another 10 or 12 next week before we get to Labor Day. So in the US, 2 weeks from today is Labor Day, and so a holiday for most Americans. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your Monday and week. Take care. See you later. Be global and unstoppable. Thanks, Mohammed. Thank you. Thanks.